Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are so glad that you are here. We're also very grateful for the presence of our guests here this morning. This is Faith and Science Sunday here at First Presbyterian Church of Hastings. This is our second annual event. It is going to become a regular event, and we're delighted that we as Presbyterians can engage both our minds and our hearts in our faith and talk with people who have experience in both faith and in science to see that there's a complementary relationship between the two. These things are not in opposition to each other. And as Presbyterians, we celebrate that we serve a creative God who is creating and creates us to be intellectual creatures who can work and try to understand what it is that God is up to in creation and to be a part of that. And so you may remember last year, for those of you who were able to attend, we had a wonderful guest, Dr. Robert von Trebra, who was a PhD chemist and also a ordained pastor. And he worked as an industrial chemist and had some patents to his name, and then felt the call to ministry, went to seminary and became a pastor. And he shared with us both in the Adult Ed Forum and at worship on Sunday. And that was a wonderful kickoff to the Faith and Science Symposium. And this year we have yet another amazing guest and a wonderful set of panelists here. Yeah, I'm actually referring to the professors. No, but we are very delighted to do this. This is the Sachtleben Throckmorton Faith and Science Symposium, named in honor of Dr. Sachtleben and Dr. Throckmorton, who were physics and astronomy professors at Hastings College for decades. And we're delighted to continue this tradition, and it will, like I said, become an annual tradition. It's also a wonderful partnership with Hastings College. So on Friday, Clay Anderson was at the college, and he was able to speak with, do a large public lecture for the community, and also speak with student groups and the board of trustees of the college. And so he spent his day Friday there, spent his day Saturday hanging out in Hastings and reliving all of his wonderful college memories. Clay Anderson is a Hastings College alum. And now he's here with us this morning. He'll be here for our Adult Ed Forum, also for worship. And then at 3 p.m., there is a public lecture in our sanctuary to which all are welcome to attend. This may be an event that you might want to call your friends and invite them to come join you. I heard his lecture on Friday. He's got some beautiful visuals that he shares with us, as well as some wonderful stories. And so it's definitely worth it to come back at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It'll be different than what you hear this morning, and different than what you hear in worship, and so we hope you can join us for that. But without further ado, let me open us with a word of prayer, and then we will begin this panel discussion with these wonderful guests. Let's pray. Creator God, you created the heavens and the earth. You set the planets in the sky, rotating around the sun. And then you created us, oh God, your greatest project of all. We thank you for your creativity, God, and we thank you that as your beloved children, you've created us to be thoughtful and intellectual beings who seek to engage our hearts and our minds in understanding the fullness of your creation and the fullness of your love for us. Because, oh God, we see your love in the beauty of creation. We see your provision you provide for us in creation. And you have invited us to study that creation and to celebrate you in the midst of that. And so we thank you, God. We thank you for the presence of our guests here, for Clay Anderson, who had a chance to see the earth from a vantage point that very few of us get a chance to see, but oh God, you know that vantage point. We also thank you for biology and religion professors, for Dr. Amanda Solem and Dr. Dorothy Dean, who are here to help us engage our hearts and our minds and our faith as we think about the complementary relationship between faith and science. Thank you, oh God. What a gift you have given us. It's in Christ's holy and loving name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, I don't know that Clay Anderson needs a lot of introduction, but most of you know he was a Hastings College alum, graduated from Hastings College, went on to work as an engineer for NASA for 15 years. Over the course of 15 years, applied to become an astronaut 15 times, and was finally accepted as an astronaut and spent 15 years as an astronaut, including spending about almost 6 months living aboard the International Space Station. 2 different flights up into space. And so we're very excited. He's Nebraska's own and only astronaut. And he's here with us in part. I mean, he'll share a little bit about this, but the shaping that he had at Hastings College, and particularly from Dr. Sachtleben as a professor of physics and astronomy. Also, we have Dorothy Dean, who is a religion professor at Hastings College and a friend of the church. She sings in our choir, so she may be a familiar face to you. And Dr. Amanda Solem, who is Lutheran, and so we love that about you. She's skipping First St. Paul's today to be here with us for this, and so we thank her for that as well. But what an illustrious panel we have here, and what a joy and the delight it is to be able to hear from them. So I gave them some questions ahead of time. I'll kick things off as the moderator with the first question, and we'll just see where this conversation leads. There are 9 questions. I'm doubting we're going to get through all 9. I think we got through 3 of them last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, but the first question is about the role of wonder. Both science and faith evoke a sense of wonder. So how do you think this shared sense of awe can be a bridge between faith and science?
Who's going first?
You go first.
Or you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Don? I don't know. Bill? Houston, we have a problem.
So as I read through all these questions and made little notes on my questions, which is what I was taught to do at Hastings College, right? Studied up for like hours for the last 3 nights, just like I did in physics. This question is interesting to me. I have a favorite contemporary Christian singer named Steve Green. He's out of Tennessee these days. I got to know him through the Columbia accident because he was very tight with the Columbia commander and his family. And he sings a song called God of Wonder. And, you know, the line that, and actually used this line in my astronaut application essay that we had to write. You know, the first part of the line is, we're pilgrims on a journey of a narrow road, and those who've gone before us line the way. And that's kind of what I am, I think, is I look at the journey of all the people that I've interacted with in my life, and I'm on that path to be one of those pilgrims that hopefully people will look at in the future. And when you go into space, and I'm a believer, but when I went into space, it was like, because you cannot imagine how bright the planet is. I mean, it's at when the sunlight is bouncing off the earth in daylight, it's just like, wow. And then the colors are so dynamic and they're different, and there's white and there's blue and there's green and there's brown and orange and yellow. And I mean, the entire spectrum is laid out before you in a different way every single day. And so I was in awe of the planet, but I was also in awe of the creator that put me in that place. And so one quick comment too is I'd like to thank Dr. Sachtleben and Carl Throckmorton and his wife Alice and their families for doing this for us. I think it's very important, and I'm honored and privileged to be here. So your turn.
That's Bill. You want to go in? I can, but you go. I don't usually use a microphone, so.
If you put it right
Close to your mouth.
Closer, okay, because I know that the big sound is, you know. And so hi, hey guys, good to see you. So I'm teaching a class right now called Religion and Film. And I have, you know, I show movies a couple times a week, we talk about them. So we literally just finished watching Contact, based on the novel by Carl Sagan. Has anyone ever seen Contact from the 90s? Yes, but it is the perfect encapsulation of this connection between faith and science, you know, using wonder as a bridge. Because agnostic Dr. Ellie Arroway ends up going through a wormhole through space to try to find intelligent life. And she has this moment where she's able to see strange galaxies and nebulae, supernova, something. And she says, they should have sent a poet, you know, because she didn't have words to describe this wonder. And it really does a good job, I think, of showing this point you get to where it's not either faith or science. It's sort of like faith and science working together. I don't really have an answer, but I would just say you should watch Contact. It's a good film.
Will there be a quiz? Thank you.
I'm Amanda Solem, and I think that there's an aspect of wonder in both of these. Some of the things that have a role of wonder for me in science might not have a role of wonder for you in science. But you know, we need people who are really fascinated by all different things. And I think one of the things that's striking is in science, I have something I wonder about, and maybe the answers aren't known, and maybe I can find them. And the excitement of that wonder is to be able to find something new and figure out something we didn't know before. And I feel like the sense of wonder in faith is something that I will never understand. There's some things that I will never be able to figure out, maybe the exactly how and the why, but that wonder can lead me to faith to understand the unknowable. So I think that they're kind of different forms of wonder.
Thank you. And before I go on, are there particular questions? I sent the questions to the panelists ahead of time. I didn't just drop them on them this morning. But were there particular questions you want to make sure that we get to, that you had a particular interest in or want to make sure that we cover? Because I want to make sure that you all have a chance to share.
No, I didn't understand most of them.
That sounds pretty consistent with what Dr. S told me about you as a
Can you tell me that again?
All right, we'll move on then to the second question on the list, which is ethics and responsibility. In what ways do we think that faith can provide an ethical framework for scientific endeavors? How can religious beliefs guide scientists in making responsible decisions?
Can we go the opposite way this time?
Sure.
All right, so we'll go back the other direction this time. So I think that the scientific enterprise does have a significant ethical burden. We see many times where science has gone astray in the past, right? And we have not treated people well, and we have not been responsible. So if you look at graduate school training programs, there's now more of a ethical training requirement that comes in that training. So the scientific field has kind of recognized times from the past where there have been errors in judgment, and they tried to incorporate more rigorous training and review and reporting of those things. And I think some of those core values are supported by a religious faith, respect for creatures and life and caring for the world around us. And I think also sometimes the church has recognized in the past they've made some of those mistakes too, right? So I think both religion and science has had times where we realize that we've made a mistake and we need to do better. And the challenge for both science and religion now is, what is the mistake we're making that we don't realize is a mistake yet, that we'll realize later?
Thanks, Amanda. I would like to say about that ideally what faith trains people to do, you know, practices of faith, practices of religious belonging, is to have a sense of humility, a sense of being able to acknowledge, wow, I do not know and I do not understand. And so if that can be brought to, say, various scientific endeavors, to say, hold on just 1 second, maybe I need to pause, maybe I need to have some questions about this. I am not God. I am not able to see all the possible outcomes, just anything that could slow things down. I'm thinking especially right now of generative AI, because as all humanities professors right now will say, it makes our lives very difficult because students don't have to think. And so I'm like, did you think before you created this? Was there any sort of like, hold on, are we destroying humanity? That's a whole other conversation. So just this little thing. But I also think that this ability to acknowledge that someone has made a mistake, like Amanda said, is really important. So, you know, if you feel like there's a framework where you have to be perfect or else, and then there is no, you just better be perfect all the time, then there's no way to actually admit that you're not perfect, right? You just have to be like, no, you're wrong. I didn't make a mistake. I meant to do that. And so I think also having some kind of framework for saying, I have done a wrong thing. I need to make some kind of amends, which is part of many religious traditions, I think can also be helpful.
So I think I agree, you have to be transparent in all of this, right? You can't, and you have to be ethical, and you have to be responsible for what you put out there as a human being. And so I point to two examples of a more modern example and then a past example, right? Galileo was an amazing astronomer who told people that, hey, it doesn't work the way you're telling me it works, doesn't work the way you're telling everybody it works. And it didn't. He was right, but he suffered because of the religious focus and that, hey, religion can't be wrong. You're wrong, dude. And we're going to put you in jail because you're wrong. Well, eventually, as they said, right, we slowed things down a little bit and we were able to gather more data and make it right and understand that he did see physical evidence that could prove what he was saying. And so I'll take you to a NASA example that I'm familiar with, right? There was a time, and I complain about this all the time, we do experiments in space every time, and if you follow NASA today, you'll hear that the crew on the space station did 72 hours of amazing science. Good for them. What did they learn? And it's hard to find what they're learning, right? But they did 72 hours of science. So we had a group of investigators that claimed that they had cured salmonella because of efforts that were going on in outer space. Okay, that's a pretty big deal, right? Turns out they didn't cure salmonella. Turns out that the two PIs were dating and they got mad at each other. And when they got mad at each other and that relationship broke apart, it turns out that the data was not telling anybody that they had cured salmonella, right? So you look at ethics, and you look at responsibility, and we have to be very careful, right? And this AI thing scares me too. I've played with Chat GPT a lot. He and I are becoming good friends. But it's amazing what you can plug into that thing and what comes out. But like they said, you better be ready to understand what it kicked out and don't just put it out there as Clay's answer, right? There has to be study behind it. There has to be integrity. There has to be responsibility for the information that you send to the public or send out to the world. I hope that makes sense.
Clay, I'm going to pick up on that a little bit from your talk on Friday, and you talked about how important integrity is to you as an astronaut, and that's one of the key aspects that you attribute to your success, but also to what it means to be a faithful astronaut. So talk a little bit more about integrity and the importance of integrity in your work and how you might connect that to your faith.
So I teach at Iowa State University and as an adjunct professor, and I teach freshmen in aerospace engineering, freshman 10, whatever they call the number, but it's the beginning class for aerospace engineers. And I teach the ethics portion, so I teach with a couple other instructors, but I have 6 modules that I teach: teamwork, ethics, the future of flight, the past flight, space environment, and life support and environmental control systems, right? So I have all those things. So ethics is a big one for me. And it's important because I share stories of actuality. That's the good thing I can bring to the classroom. They ask me a question and I usually have a story that happened to me in space, in training at NASA. And that's very true with the ethical responsibility. We talk about, unfortunately, the astronaut who I looked up to as having the right stuff. As a fighter pilot, as a commander of a shuttle, he had it all. He was 6'4", he was good looking, he was smart, he was a fighter pilot. And then he rose into the management ranks, and then Columbia happened. And when Columbia happened, nobody knew how he was affected by Columbia. And it would turn out, unfortunately, that he was in Alabama in a hotel, taking sleeping pills and drinking. And he decided at 2 a.m. to get in his car and drive to see his son. As he drove to see his son, he caused a car accident that had a family of 4 with 2 daughters in the back seat, not seat belted in, and they died. Then, to make matters worse, a pickup truck came to render aid. when the guy got out of the pickup truck to help, the astronaut tried to steal his pickup truck and flee the scene. Okay. He's now serving time in jail. And of course, we also have the other astronaut who put on the diaper with pepper spray and drove to Florida to squirt her boyfriend's other girlfriend in the face with pepper spray, right? So we're human. We have human frailties that, for me, my faith helps me maintain my integrity. Now, one place where I failed in space was I tried to be as transparent with the ground as possible, right? And I would get frustrated. I was the only American with 2 Russian dudes, and they were great dudes. They were Russian dudes. And the Russian dudes don't understand Americans' problems sometimes, especially when it's Clay and mission control. And so I would do things and say things that I probably should have rethought. For example, one day I told, at the end of the day, we have a little quick phone call on to mission control. We talk about the end of the day. And I said, I'm a US taxpayer. And today we did not spend my tax dollars wisely. Well, they didn't like that. I was trying to be funny, but I was trying to make a point by being funny. And so what I tell the kids at Iowa State is, you have to be careful how you deliver your message, right? And that's been a problem of mine my entire life, right, Doc S? Actually, I probably should say, right, Doc T? Right, but to deliver the message in the appropriate way to get your point across when when you want to be ethical, but you want to be responsible, right? I was trying to tell them, hey, this was a poor day. This was not an organized day. This was not a good day for space, not a good day for science, not a good day for me, but I could have told them differently, right? I could have said it a better way. And so that put us in a bit of a fight in that, oh, he's got an attitude. Oh, he's an astronaut with an attitude. Well, there are a lot of astronauts with attitudes, but if they play the game right, that attitude doesn't come out. So I don't know if that, but that's a true example, right? And those kids at Iowa State, they suck up true examples, because then I can say, all right, you just have to say it the right way. You have to be a team player. You can't call Joey over here an idiot because his dad was stupid. Right? You have to be able to frame your argument so that everybody wins, everybody moves forward, everybody advances in the right scientific path to do the right thing. Okay.
Anything else the other panelists want to break?
So yeah, if you look at, there's sort of like a couple categories of ethical missteps in science. Some involve harm to people or animals, but the things that you see a lot more commonly now are people who fabricate or falsify data. And we've even had some papers that were retracted because they were AI written and reference sources that don't exist, that AI made up, right? And a lot of
I
times,
see on that paper.
if you ask why are people making up data, and why are they falsifying data? And I think in a large part, it's a product of the stress that they're under, right? So they feel that in order to get the funding and meet the standard and do their job, that's the only way that they can do it. And so there are many different ways that you can try to be resilient to that stress to make a better choice. And one of the ways, it doesn't work for everyone, but one of the things that you can call on to help you kind of stay strong to avoid that temptation would be faith.
Thank you. So we're going to shift gears here. And this next question is actually based on a conversation I had with Dr. Sachtleben as we were dreaming about creating this Faith and Science Symposium. And Dr. Sachtleben said he really enjoyed speaking with the students, and he would talk about the theories of the origin of the universe and the scientific consensus that the universe is somewhere between 4 and 4 billion years old. And he got really excited about this. If you've seen him lecture, he gets really excited about these things. And he would have students come up to him after class, and students would say, Dr. S, we know that you're a Christian. We know you go to church. How do you reconcile the scientific consensus of the universe being 4 billion or 4.5 billion years old with your faith? And Dr. Sachtleben loved those conversations. He loved to sit in the classroom with his students and talk through those things. And so the question I have for each of you is about the origin of the universe. And how do we think that faith and science offer complementary perspectives on the origin and development of the universe?
I'm holding the mic, so I'll go first this time. So, you know, a little question, easy to answer. But back in high school, I had a biology professor actually, who was asked by one of the students in a kind of challenging way, you know, oh, you're teaching us about evolution, but what about the Bible? Don't you think these things don't get along? And she gave an answer that I always now just have stolen and I give all the time. I'm giving her credit today, so that's okay. She said, you know, she always thought of it that science tells us how, like, how do these processes work? What are plate tectonics? How old is the universe? And the Bible tells us why. The Bible is not meant to be a science textbook. The Bible is meant to be a textbook, or not a textbook, but a record of, you know, God wrestling of people over hundreds, if not thousands of years, that then others can draw on in their own lives and their own struggles. It's not meant to be, oh yeah, I'm going to use this in chemistry 101. That would be a misuse of the book, just as it would be a misuse for Pastor Greg to get a chemistry textbook and be like, my sermon today comes from chapter 2, you know, Avogadro's number. So anyway, I think that's sort of a way to think of it. Don't try to use a thing for what it's not meant to do. Otherwise you get this incredible tension between faith and science on issues of the origin of the universe.
I think that's a cool answer. I like it, right? What I tell people, and I hope I don't make anyone angry today, but imagine if all of us were assigned the task of writing a Bible. And each of us wrote a different chapter. We got together, we stapled them, we put them in a bin, and we buried it. And in 4, 5, 6,000 years, somebody dug up our Bible and then began to translate it and then began to interpret what we all wrote individually based on our personal experiences. And I know this is probably too simplistic, but for my brain, that's how I have to think of stuff, right? I'm slightly above average. I'm not a genius in any way, shape, or form. But this is the way I try to approach problems so that I can understand it and then explain it to other people in a way that works. And I've always said that faith and science are not mutually exclusive, not at all. And when I was in space, and I told people this the other day, as I looked at the Earth every single day, our orbit changes every single day. The Earth rotates beneath us. We're rotating around the Earth. The oblateness of the spheroid we call Earth causes our orbit to regress a little bit every day. And so we're constantly seeing the Earth in different places every day. But if you looked out the window and saw this, again, it's just incredible. And for us to be on a spheroid that has every single thing we need to survive in a solar system with 8 other planets that don't have that, they may have had it at one time, and we're trying to figure that out, right? We're trying to send probes out. We're trying to learn how the solar system evolved. But then that's just our solar system in the Milky Way galaxy. Now your head starts to hurt, right? And we don't understand much about the Milky Way galaxy. We know the closest galaxy is Andromeda, right? And it's light years away. When are we going to go there? I don't know. But never bet against Elon Musk. But so there's a snicker at the table. And so these are things that fascinate me, right? That I totally believe that there was a big bang, right? We know that the universe continues to expand. Well, that usually happens in the vacuum of space when something goes and has velocity in every single direction. The velocities are not exactly the same, but they're moving in the same idea at different speeds. The pieces are smaller, so they move faster, and the pieces are bigger, they move slower, all those things that cause me to understand that, hey, I get the Bible, and she's exactly right. That's the why. It's not the F equals MA and del dot B equals 0. You thought I'd get that one, didn't you? Don't know what it means, but I remember the, like.
Yeah, and so I agree that, I think the Bible would be a really hard read if it included all the scientific detail. Like, and especially if you want it to be something that can speak across thousands of years, when that information is going to change over thousands of years, you want those writings to reflect the core of what you want to communicate, which is probably not all of the details. But I think there always will be some questions that science can answer about the universe and some that it can't, right? So the why, as Dorothy said. But for people that take the Bible literally, there's going to be conflict between the biblical writing and the scientific knowledge. And if someone needs the Bible to be literal, and that's the way that they can survive in this world, I think that's fine, right? But that's not going to fit very well with the scientific view. So if I take a non-literal view and I want the Bible to be true, what's the thing that I have to reconcile those? It's faith, right? So faith allows you to believe in something even when it's not clear exactly how or why they fit together.
Can I say one more thing on that as well? Thanks, Amanda. Sure. Sorry. I'm gonna clear my throat. I haven't had enough water this morning yet. All right, hold on. I had that thought. It was really cool. Oh, okay. So two things. One is the concept of the God of the gaps, right? You know, if God only functions for you as how you explain stuff you can't explain, I feel like that does a disservice to God, the concept of God generally, because it's just sort of like, when you drop an apple, why does it fall? Oh, I don't know, God makes it fall. And they're like, well, no, we've discovered this thing called gravity. Like, well, okay, I guess God didn't do that. Well, what else did, and so God, if God is only there to fill the gaps in your knowledge, then God gets smaller and smaller as you find out more things. And I think that's why some people have this feeling of like, science is bad. It's not trying to explain stuff. But on the other hand, I lost my thought. It's there. It was there. As Amanda was talking, I'm like crystallizing it in my head, and now it's going away. Oh, right. Because you were talking about this sort of faith that you don't need to understand it. I remember. Oh, yes, truth. So what if, in the words of Pontius Pilate, which is never a good way to start, what is truth? But like, I tell my students sometimes that I think Hamlet, the play by Shakespeare, I think Hamlet is true, right? You read Hamlet, and if you've gone through grief, if you've dealt with depression and doubt, you read Hamlet and you're like, that is such a true thing. I've experienced that. I understand. It actually helps me understand things better. And if someone comes to me and goes, well, there wasn't really a Hamlet, he's made up, I won't be like, well, fine, burn it. I'm never going to read it again. Because it doesn't have to be factually, literally true. It's true in a much deeper way. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible is just like the works of Shakespeare, but it's that kind of, there are multiple ways that a thing can be true. And I don't think truth, again, is just, this describes a literal event. Truth can be something sort of much deeper.
Yeah.
I'm not holding the mic again. We need to do our astronaut thing.
Continue.
Thank you.
By the way, these two are really good.
So we've got, I love the oblique spheroid and God of the gaps were both part of that answer. Thank you. And I love that the words oblique spheroid were uttered in this room. I'm going to stay here.
Oblate.
Oblate, excuse me, oblate spheroid. Yes, got it. All right, we're going to move from the very high level origin of the universe, the Big Bang Theory and 4 billion years old, down to us frail humans and human identity and purpose. And so from your perspective, from where you sit, what insights do both faith and science provide about what it means to be human, about our identity and our purpose in life? And how can the perspectives from both faith and science help to inform our understanding of what it means to be human?
So I am totally blessed in my life. I'm a small town kid from Ashland, Nebraska, who had a dream, who had people and a community surrounding him that didn't tell me, well, that's stupid. You can't do that. they encouraged me, they gave me the opportunity, they gave me a little leash and threw it out a little ways, and I would pull on it, just like I did when I was spacewalking some 40 years later, right? But the idea of, those are the people who made me the human that I am today. Yeah, I had a little bit to do with it, but mostly it was the influence that I got from my parents and my family, except for my sister. She didn't help much. She's here, by the way. My family, my community, my teachers in high school and junior high, the whole gambit. Then when I came to Hastings College, no one told me I couldn't do things. There was an encouraging environment to learn, to search, to seek, to figure out. And then when I got to NASA, it was somewhat similar, but there were a lot of really smart people there that were kind of wacko. I mean, they were very unique individuals, but they were brilliant and they did stuff. You know, one guy lost his roof in a storm, so he went up and he nailed license plates back up on his roof because he didn't want to spend the money to get a new roof. But this guy was brilliant, right? I was never sure how to equate it. There were a lot of those folks there, but they shaped me, right? I could watch, I could learn, I could listen, I could get smarter, I could take ideas in my, I'm gonna keep that idea, oh, probably don't want to put license plates on my roof anytime soon. And that's how I grew into someone that NASA began to trust as an engineer, as a leader, as a future piece of their puzzle. And then they were smart enough to select me as an astronaut after 15 years of try. So my faith in myself was key to all that. But I also had the ability to earn the faith of those around me who helped lift me up. I don't know if I even answered your question, but yeah.
Okay. I'm making a lot of references. Turns out I speak in references, much like that Star Trek Next Generation society that they met. But the one person in the room was like, yeah, the ones who say when the walls fell. Me too. Thank you. Thank you for being the one person who remembers that. But so yeah, it turns out I speak in references, at least today. Has anyone read Mark Twain's short stories? Oh, all of us, we all have. Yes, a very common reading. Okay, I don't know. My mom bought me books. So there's a short story about a colonel of someone. A colonel has died and he's, going to be sent to heaven, and heaven is literally somewhere like through the other side of the universe. And he's flying there and talking to St. Peter, one of the angels. And they're going past other planets, and he's having the whole short story is this conversation where the colonel realizes that there are, of course, many other planets that have intelligent life on them. And the angel's sort of looking incredulously at the colonel, going like, what, you think you're the only planet that God needed to save? You think, Jesus only came down here? Like, no, he's become incarnate in the form of all of these other planets. And I think, I was thinking of that with this idea of like humans and how we often think that we are, this pinnacle, yeah, we're this pinnacle of things. And if science, for example, can help broaden our perspective, like how huge the universe is, how tiny we are, I think that's going to be a good thing for everyone, generally speaking. And I think that aligns with faith as well. One of my favorite books of the Bible is the book of Job, specifically the second to last chapter, where God speaks to Job out of the whirlwind and says, you guys know this? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And then he goes on and describes all of these things he does he says, do you let the wild ass go free? Which is always funny. He means a donkey. He talks about, can you sport with Leviathan? Can you, are you able to tame behemoth? And he lists all these other animals, do you know where this bird lays her eggs and all of these things. And it's really trying to say, like, I have taken care of so many things and you were just itty bitty. And that's the answer to all of Job's questions. So I think both science and faith kind of give us that sense, once again, of humility and of being part of something much larger
I think she's got identity covered, so I'll go for purpose. So I think both, faith and science have kind of intersecting ways that they can affect a sense of purpose. So the Bible does give us lists of things that we can do to live a purposeful life, right? And, science also, can give you a sense of purpose that you're discovering something that we didn't know. You're making a new treatment, you're getting farther into space than we did before, right? You're reaching some kind of purpose to improve humanity. But I think both of them also highlight inherent value, and that there's a purpose in life just for existing as a person, that you don't have. So like if we look at that in a faith community, although we would like you to do a lot of works, it is grace that will save you, right? So it's just that your existence and the sacrifice that Jesus made that allows you to achieve your purpose just by existing, right? And I think also if we look at some of the ethical guidelines in science and we look at respect for persons, that there are ethical guidelines that everyone has an inherent value for existing as a person. And we especially want to protect people who are vulnerable, which I think is also common with a religious perspective.
Piggyback. I want to piggyback on something that Dorothy said in that. I talked about this the other day. The universe is massive, it's infinite, we can't understand how big it is, so I use my pizza analogy. So imagine that the universe is a huge, massive, infinite pizza. And on this crust over here, where we think we're it, are us. And what we've done in space, we've gone 238,000 miles to the moon and back and brought humans safely home. And we're working on doing that again some 30 years, 40 years later, actually longer than that. But what if on that infinite pizza on the opposite crust, 180 degrees over here, is a species doing exactly what we're doing, right? Very similar to the colonel flying through space, talking to the angel who's saying, hey, did you see the guys over here on the pizza? Oh, no, I thought we were the only people on the pizza. But if they're over there, if they're doing exactly what we're doing, my dream is that we meet at the pepperoni in the middle. But in order to meet at that pepperoni in the middle, we have to have the funds to be able to do it in today's world. In Star Trek world, they don't need money anymore. We need to have the technical development that comes from our growing, expanding brain. And we have to have the time to do it. We have to make it happen, right? So I love what these guys said. This is awesome sitting next to these geniuses over here, because everything they say does not in any way so far conflict with what I believe, what my faith tells me is possible. And so we are it because we're the only it we know. And I did a speech in Lincoln one time and my phone rang in the middle of the speech. I forgot to turn my phone off and I looked at the thing, it's freaking Larry the Cable Guy. And Larry the Cable Guy's calling me on my phone, so I stopped the speech. I said, hold on, it's Larry the Cable Guy. And I put it on speaker. They all said hi to Larry the Cable Guy. And then I said, I'll call you back. When I call him back, he said, can you come over to the house? Well, yeah. And so I go over to the house and he's an amazing guy. He's very smart and he's very faithful. And so we're talking about faith and he's writing jokes on his yellow notepad. And I asked him for a couple space jokes. He said, yeah, I can probably do that for you. But he never has. So he always gets 2 space jokes. But as we talked about faith, right, he was very adamant that what the Bible said, he was much more literal than I am with respect to the Bible, which is totally fine. And as we had that discussion about, well, Clay, there's Adam, there's Eve, and that's about it, right? And then you read the Bible and it tells you what happens. But again, it's something that you read and you apply as it relates to you. And I always found that story fun. Not many people get called by Larry the Cable Guy. And but the fact that we went to his house and we broke bread together and talked a little bit about faith was a cool thing. And his perspective was and is different than mine. But it's still very valid, right? It's still very cool.
And I think Larry the Cable Guy introduced you to his opener, Nick Hoff, and you were on Nick Hoff's podcast.
Yep.
Nick Hoff grew up in this church.
In Hastings,
His
yep.
picture's over on that wall.
Oh, good. I'm gonna have to tweet something here later.
Nick Hoff's very proud dad sent me the podcast while I was with you on campus on Friday, so I could listen to it. So, and I'm gonna nerd out for just a moment here. Those of you who don't know, I had a Christian rock radio show in college. The father of Christian rock is a fellow by the name of Larry Norman. So this is a kind of reference to your God of Wonders. Larry Norman started the Christian rock movement, and he wrote a song called Unidentified Flying Object, which actually talks about Christ's ascension into heaven. But in the bridge of that song, I'm getting there, in the bridge of that song, he says, if there's life on other planets, I'm sure that God must know, and he's been there once already and has died to save their souls. So that ties in with your Twain quote, and it ties in. So anyways, sorry. It came into my mind and it couldn't leave me. All right, we'll move on. The role of doubt. Both faith and science deal with a doubt and certainty and uncertainty in different ways. How can these differing approaches to doubt enrich our understanding of the world and our place in it?
I have a good doubt story. I got selected in June of 1998. That's when I got the phone call to tell me that they wanted me to become an astronaut. So then in August, I was told to report to Ellington Field in Houston, Texas, and go to building hangar 273 and go up to the PE shop, the personal equipment shop. And I did all that, and I got in that room, and there was a guy named Sarge. And Sarge took charge of me, and he was from Nebraska, which was kind of cool. Sarge took me into a small room with a green painted picnic table, and he said, sit down at the picnic table, Clay. And he went and he reached behind a counter and he pulled up one of those green big military bags that you see you guys going through the airport sometimes with, and he plops it on top of the table. So he opens the bag and he says, Clay, here's your boots, here's your knee pad, here's your flashlight, here's your wristwatch, here's your jacket, here's your stuff, and here's your flight suit. Try it on. And he left the room. And in the room was a big full-length mirror. So I try on my flight suit, and I noticed that it had a leather patch where this one is, and it said Clayton C. Anderson, Astronaut Mission Specialist, Johnson Space Center, Houston, Texas. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror wearing this blue flight suit thinking, I made it, I've arrived. Well, then training started. Training started with F-18, F-16, F-15, helicopter, Chinook pilots, and PhDs in chemistry, and PhDs in physics, and PhDs in this, that, and the other thing. And international astronauts from all around Europe, from Canada, from Japan, from Brazil even, right? And I'm feeling pretty full of doubt, right? Well, what's this Ashland kid with just a master's degree in aerospace engineering, went to Hastings College? Where's that? Right? Where'd you go to college? MIT, Purdue, Caltech. Would you like to hear more? No. But I'm full of doubt, right? And I'd be home in the bed with my wife at night, and we'd be talking about how training was going, and I'd be so frustrated, and I'd be so afraid, and I don't know I can do that. I don't feel like I belong. And she said, hey, you dreamed about this your entire life. This is what you've always wanted to do. Nobody said it would be easy. And she pretty much said, just buck up and go. Get after it, right? So I took those words of advice. I finally listened to my wife after however many years we've been married. And we had an exam scheduled because the 1996 class of astronauts, 44 of them, had some issues, some controversial things going on within that class of 44. So they decided that the class of 1998, which was 32 astronauts, would take exams. And we would be graded on our exams, and your grades had to do with your status, your ability to get a flight assignment, the whole 9 yards. So I go in for our first exam. We're sitting at a table like this. I always sat in the front row. There were 32 of us now, right? 7 internationals and the rest were Americans. And they put this exam in front of everybody, told us we had 60 minutes to complete the exam. And I look at it and I go through the questions and, check that, check that, check that, flip the page, check, flip the page. Got done in 3 minutes. I'm looking around and I'm seeing all these astronauts with their heads in their hands, looking up at the sky, they're tapping their pencils. Uh-oh, better check my work. So I go back and I look and I go, well, yeah, that's okay. I'm not changing that. I'm not changing that. And I got through the whole thing again in 5 minutes, 6 minutes. I was done. And I looked around and they were still. I said, I'm done. I'm not changing anything. I got up, I turned my test in, I went into the room, which by the way, they used to videotape us because they assumed that we would cheat on our exams. Right? We're the right stuff, but we cheat. And so I waited in that room for another 10 minutes and I watched, and no one else left the room. So 15, 20 minutes have gone by and I'm the only person who's left the room. And now I'm thinking, uh-oh, I really messed this up. And I left, I came back, and the day or the hour that they gave us our exams back, they put it down in front of me and I lifted up the page and it said 100%. I hadn't missed a question, not one. And it was that moment that I knew I belonged. I knew I could compete with the F-15 and the F-16 and the F-18 fighter pilots with the PhDs in chemistry and physics. I knew I belonged. And that was a huge moment of doubt removal for me. And then I went on and had a pretty successful astronaut career. But it wasn't like that up front.
So I think doubt can play an important role in both of these. I think a lot of people find that their faith doesn't grow until they've had to overcome doubt, right? And that may happen several times over your lifetime. And that's often also true in science. Some of the largest discoveries we make are things that we didn't think were true, right? So someone gets results that make them doubt a standard. So one of them, for instance, when we had COVID, right? All the information about related viruses from before was that it was transmitted through respiratory droplets, right? And so that's where we had all our guidelines about how we should try to protect ourselves. And then some people started to doubt that that's how it was being transmitted, and they tested it and found that it could be transmitted as an aerosol, right? And that was a really important discovery. But that had to be something where people had to question and doubt what was known to test it and find new things. And there are many examples through science where the biggest discoveries were doubted, and they'll often be pushed back from the establishment. The scientists who got the Nobel Prize for discovering that Helicobacter pylori causes stomach ulcers, no one believed them that they could survive in the pH of the stomach, so they drank it and they gave themselves ulcers. And then they took antibiotics and cured themselves. So then people believe them.
I don't think I can be either of these. Ready for the next question.
We got one more question because we need to wrap up about 10:15 so everybody can get to worship, right? And then come back at 3 o'clock where Clay will be sharing a lot more stories and pictures, and then also have a time for Q&A at 3 o'clock. So we hope you'll come back for us with that. But this closing question actually speaks to the heart of this Faith and Science Symposium, and it's about collaboration and dialogue. And so the question is, what are some effective ways for religious and scientific communities to collaborate? How can we encourage constructive dialogue between the two? And this Faith and Science Symposium and the genius of Dr. Sachtleben and Dr. Throckmorton encouraging this kind of thing is precisely a model of that. How the Academy, Hastings College, and First Presbyterian Church come together, bring together religion and science professors and really interesting and smart scientists and astronauts and that sort of thing to have these conversations. But from your all's perspective, how do we think that we can find some effective ways for religious and scientific communities to collaborate and encourage constructive dialogue between the two?
Well, you kind of took my answer, because I was going to say, this is a really good start. That's really all I've got right now. I don't know if either of you want to.
So that's a great question. I agree with her. This is a really great start, right? I've also, in my Iowa State world and other places, I've suggested that in every high school, for example, if you do art, and if you think about science, technology, engineering, and math, and a lot of people like me like to insert the A in there for arts, because I think it's important. And if I play a trombone or a guitar, that is physics, right? If I paint a painting using a certain type of paint on a certain background, that's chemistry. Yes? So one of the things I've suggested at some schools that I've been involved with is to, at the high school level, or even maybe at the junior high level, is tie some of those classes together. Right? Now, that, we're not talking faith yet, I understand that, but if you tie those two things together, the arts and the sciences, you can get some positive results. And then if you do things like this and tie faith to the sciences, you have even more possibilities. And so events like this are incredibly important. You know, my time that I had to take a religious class at Hastings College, right? Everybody said, whoa, whoa. I loved it. That class was one of the best classes I had in my 4 years at Hastings College. Kudos to Scott McCormick, but I mean, it was amazing. And I learned a lot, and it opened my eyes to certain things. So I think those are things that, even though sometimes they're frowned upon, that I think it's good to continue to push the idea that you can partner things to make them both better.
Well, I did want to just add to that, gave me an idea. Yeah, one of the ways that we can encourage constructive dialogue between faith and science, or religious and scientific communities, is to advance an understanding that science and faith don't have to be at odds with each other. In some parts, we can advance that through explaining how all the things that I've just said about, you know, the how and the why. And I think if there's more education and more understanding that you don't have to pick one or the other, and they're constantly at war, then we can make a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I think it is challenging in this area. We do have some quite entrenched groups that really want to create more division instead of reducing it. And I don't think shouting at them is a useful way to change that. But I think, like, for instance, if we were to ever have an outreach event for the community that had like scientific activities, and all different faiths were invited to also have stuff alongside it, that would be something we could do, where they just happen to be in the same place and there's no judgment about excluding anyone for any reason, and everyone can be there together, so people have a chance to experience different ideas.
You'll need free food for that.
That's actually a perfect note to end on, that we would need free food for that. I think bringing bread together, I think sharing hospitality with people that we may fundamentally even disagree with. Your example of Larry the Cable Guy, how you have different views of the inerrancy of the Bible, but that doesn't change the fact that you all can share a meal together. And to pick up on that theme, come join us in worship at 10:30, where we'll be talking about precisely that. We'll also have a reflection from Clay Anderson, and then come back at 3 o'clock. But you all are part of that by choosing to come here this morning. You're part of that collaboration and dialogue. You're part of breaking down those walls between faith and science, and realizing that we, as God's creatures, we serve a creative and creating God, and we are part of that creation, and we are blessed beyond measure for that. And so thank you all for coming. We hope you'll join us for worship and join us again at 3 o'clock. Thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate all of you being here and for your insight. And yeah, thanks.